Welcome to this episode of Learning Fusion. In today's episode, we're going to be covering 3D materials. So let's roll this intro and let's get into it.
We're learning fusion together. We'll learn 2D stuff and 3D stuff and particle stuff and compositing stuff, deep pixel stuff and tracking stuff, but not other stuff, but some other cool stuff, cause we're learning fusion together.
So here we are in Fusion, and we got a quick little setup. We've got our camera, we've got a shape going into our Merge 3D. We've got some directional lighting going into our Render 3D and then our Media Out. And just remember your Render 3D node. Make sure you enable your lighting and shadows or you're not going to be able to see any of this stuff. So the way Fusion does textures or shaders or materials is a little different than your typical 3D programs. It's kind of hard to explain. So we're just going to get into it and I'll show you what I mean. So within Fusion, there are four main effects or four main materials we use. So like say in like Blender, we use like the principal BDSD shader or whatever it's called. Can't remember. But our principal shaders, we use those to build our materials. Fusion does the same thing, but it uses four main ones. So if we go in our little 3D effects area up here, you'll see we have this material and we have textures. And under our material tab is our four different main shaders we use. And those are the blend, the cook torrents, the Fong, and the ward. So these are the four main shaders we use to create materials on our little 3D objects. And they're kind of the same, but a little different. So I'm going to add a shift space switch. I'm going to add a switch up here and we're just going to connect them all and we'll see what they do. So on my blend, I'm just going to input into 1, my Fong into input 2 or 1. And let me add some more inputs. Let's get 4 inputs there. There we go. And this is input 2. So my ward into input 2 and my cook torrents into input 3. And we're just going to plug this into our material input. So on all of our shapes, we have this green triangle, and that's where we input our materials that we're creating on shapes. So there we go, we got an input, and all my little materials here are just shaded white. So if I look at these, they're all just white, but it looks a little yellowish, and that's because of my directional lighting has a warm color to it. So anyway, the difference between these is mainly how they reflect. So right now we're on the blend, and if I change this to the Fong, you can see our reflection changed a little bit. And if I go to our ward here, which is number 2, you notice we get this like kind of elongated or different reflection. And if I go to our cook torrents, there isn't much reflection at all. It's kind of like rubber material or plastic material. So that is literally the only difference between all the different shaders is how they reflect. Now, these two have the same inputs and these two have different inputs. And what I mean by that is our actual inputs here. So I'm going to go over those inputs and I'll use the blend as an example. So on all of our nodes, we have this material input right here. And this is just whatever we're using for shading. So this would be your diffuse or your albedo, or you can even bring in a movie if you wanted to. So I could technically bring in this movie, input it into my material, and there we go. We've got our movie playing on our little shape, and our shape is transformed. So there we go. That's our material. So we can bring any 2D image into our materials. So let's go ahead and disconnect that, and I'll stick it over there for a second. So for example, if we have a typical like downloaded texture that we use from like Megascans or from Polyhaven or whatever, we could use those textures to build our textures within here. Of course, we could just use this if we wanted to, because we can come here and we can change the color to whatever color we want. Additionally, on all of them, we can change our specular, and it is a little different on each one, and I'll cover that here in a second. But we can also build this out with materials or textures that we downloaded. So for example, I've got one right here. Here's a stone floor. So we're going to use this to create, actually, let's not use that one. Let me find a better one. There we go. Let's use this one here, and we're going to use this stone floor texture to build out our material on our little sphere there. So let's check this out, and as soon as I plug this into my diffuse material, there we go. We've got our material on our sphere, and it's correctly mapped, and there we go. Now, when you download materials or textures, I know you get extra ones, and this isn't quite the same as, say, Blender or Houdini when we're building out materials. So I'll kind of show you how to do that. Now, a lot of times you'll get your AO as well, and our little AO just gives it a little more depth to it. But we can't just plug that in straight. What we have to do is we have to merge these two together because we don't have an AO input. So to be able to do that, all we have to do is get a merge, stick it down there, grab our AO, put that in the foreground, and on our merge, we're going to change this to multiply. So there we go. We just multiplied that on our shape. So it just gives it a little more depth when we're talking about that that material using that AO. And if I go to my merge and I change my blend, you can kind of see the difference it's making there. Not much, but a little bit, and it's going to be dependent on your material. Some AOs are a little stronger than others. So that's our diffuse and AO that we just plug straight into our color material. Now, mind you, on all of these, if it says color, it's looking for an actual 2D image, and it's using your color channels. If it says something other than color, so here it says specular color, here it says specular exponent material, intensity material, and bump map. Now this color, the specular color, is actually looking for a color. And what that means is if I go to our blend, you see we have the specular color. I can technically go in here and change the color of my specular so our reflection is a different color. Or I can add something to drive that color, meaning I could even take our little girls dancing here, input that into a little specular color. Now I've got our girls dancing on our little reflection in the background. If I increase that, you can see our girls dancing within our specular color area. So let's go ahead and unplug them. So if you have something to plug in, you can, or if you just want to use your natural lighting, you would just leave that white and it would reflect whatever color lighting you have on your 3D objects, meaning any lights we have going into our 3D merge. Now, when we start getting into like our specular roughness and all that stuff, these operate a little different. And that's where our little exponent materials and our intensity materials come into play. And these are technically looking for alpha channels. So for example, we're going to disconnect this, and let me just bring in a text node here. And on our text node, I'm just going to type in text. There you go. We've got text. And if you notice, we have alpha around our text. So we've got an alpha channel going on. And if I input this into our material and we look at our render node, I can increase this size here so it is going over our little shape better. And I can spin our shape so you can see it says text. There we go. We've got our text on our little shape there. Now, if I wanted to use this text as a reflection, I could use this on my little teal input. And what this is going to do, it's going to alter the fall off of our little exponent. So this exponent right here, it's impacting how this fall off works. But since this is a weird alpha, it's not falling off quite correctly. So technically in that spot right here, you would want to use like a gradient. So you could bring in a gradient, and let's create a gradient here. And on this one, we're going to knock our alpha down. So we've actually got an alpha gradient. If we go back and I plug this into our little teal area, you see it just changed our gradient right there. And on our background here, I can change where my alpha sits to change how that fall off is being affected on our 3D object there. So that's what this tealish color input is for. Now this pink input is for our actual intensity, our specular intensity, meaning this specular intensity shiner here, or this slider here, is going to be affected by whatever we input here. So if I took our text and input it there, now it's just shiny on wherever our alpha is from our text. So if I go here and increase our exponent a little bit and make it a little larger, right here, I can change the intensity of the shininess of that text. If I go to my shape, I can move it around and you can see just our text is shiny on that object. So again, it's looking for an alpha. So with that said, my point to all that is your normal materials you download don't have alphas in them. So we can't use those how they're intended to be used without doing a few things first. So let's go ahead and plug this material back in. So we've got our little tile floor there. So to be able to use, say, this shininess or this intensity, we do have a specular right here. We've got this little specular in our texture. We can use that in here, but again, we need this to be an alpha. So to be able to do that, we would first have to add a shift space bitmap mask, and not in there. We'd have to add it to the input. If I go here, I can just change this to luminance. So there's our little alpha for our little shininess there. But this I'm not going to be able to plug directly into this space because it doesn't let me do that. So next I'm going to have to add a matte control there. And I'm going to just say combine alpha, just copy it. Now I'll be able to take this matte control and plug it into that pink input. And if we look now our shininess is being driven by this bitmap right here. And if I change our intensities back, you can see that's happening a little bit. But we could technically go on our little matte control here and we can change any thresholds that we want to change that up. Additionally, if you really wanted, we could add a color curves and we could change how our color curves are working so we can get that in there a little better. But that's how you would add your specular, is you want to change it into an alpha and then make sure we're plugging that into our little intensity. Now you could plug it into this one as well, but it's going to do some odd things. So we're going to leave it in our little intensity material there. Now, as far as our bump map goes, this is where we need to input our normal maps. And a normal map is this type of map. So we can use this within our little material here. So to be able to do that, I have to first grab this bump map node. So under our texture, we have this bump map node, and I'm going to plug our texture into our bump map into this white bump map input. And under a bump map, you can, technically this is meant to be driven on this little bump map area, but I find either way works. It just depends on the look you want. So you can leave it on bump map. It's going to be super strong and you have no control, or you can use your height map and you've got this height scale so you can kind of tailor it to whatever look you want. So now if we look, we've got some bumpiness going on. And if I rotate our shape, you can see that's working nicely. And we've got our bump map driving the look of that texture. So that's how you would connect any downloaded textures that you create. And it's pretty simple, and that's the same on every single one of these. Now, the only difference is if I disconnect all this, the only difference is on our ward and our cook tolerance. So if I go to our ward, Right here, we have different inputs, which is this spread V and spread material texture. And that's just going to change how your reflection spreads, because on the ward node itself, if we go to our specular right here, we have different spread U and spread V. So we can change the spread on the U and change the spread on the V if we want. That way we can get the look we want for that reflection. And then for the Cook tolerance or Cook torrents here, let me go to input 3. If we go to our specular on this one, we have this roughness right here. So it's just changing how rough our shape or how rough our texture is to get that look we want. So if you want more plasticky or if you want it more like rubber, you can use that. And then of course we can change our refractive index. And if we don't want to use this do Fresno, we can just uncheck it and we just got straight roughness. And then, of course, on this input, we have our refractive index inputs in our roughness material inputs. And again, these are looking for alphas because as a reminder, if it says color, it's looking for a 2D color and it's using those RGB channels. If it doesn't say color, and I'm looking down here in our little info, or if we wait for it to highlight, it says diffuse color. If it says anything else like a roughness material, it's actually looking for alphas within those channels to be able to drive those intensities and roughnesses. And of course, remember our little bump map needs our bump map nodes to work correctly. So let's go ahead and plug our little material back in here. And let's look at input 0. So there you go. We've got our input not working correctly because this is supposed to go to that one. There we go. Now we do have other material nodes, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these because this would end up being like an 8 to 10 hour video if I went through every single one of these. I do have node breakdowns for everything within this texture and this material area. So if you need to jump in here, you can, but I will talk about our little material merge because this is something you'll also use quite often. We can merge materials, meaning we have our blend material that we created this look for. So we could take this and put it right there. And say I wanted to take my Fong as well. I could input that there. Let's plug this back in. Let's actually go to our Fong here and let's change our color to a crazy pinkish thing. Now, if I go to my material merge, I can use this blend to blend the two together. So I can animate it and use it to fade, and I'd be good to go. Additionally, even if I really wanted to, I can go here and let's make that white. I could take our little dancers and input that to our diffusion. So now if I push play, go to my material merge, I can fade in between our dancers, and I should probably change our shape so it's zeroed back up. And there we go. We could switch in between materials and videos if you wanted to. Don't know why, but you might want to do that. So that's generally how all of these work. Now, the best way to really learn how your materials work is to use some of the pre-built materials that come within Fusion. So if I go to these templates and go to Fusion and I look for shaders, if I go to our shaders right here, these are all shaders that Fusion has already created. So if I just drag this checker plate in, let's disconnect that, connect that up. There we go. That's the checker plate shader that they created. They've got this lizard here. So let's plug in lizard. There we go. We've got lizard, and that's our texture that was created within Fusion. So the best way to really dig in to see how they did some of this stuff is just to open up these shaders they created, and you can see all the nodes that they used to create this shader. So like I said, that is the best way to see what's happening with these shaders and how they made them, to see what's capable. And you can pretty much create whatever you want. Now, I do want to end this by saying there is no one way to do it. There's no correct way, no wrong way. No, it's just however you create a shader is how you create a shader. So have fun playing with it. And that is using textures and materials to create shaders for 3D objects within Fusion. I'll see you guys in the next Learning Fusion episode.